Cool.
Yeah, I mean we can start, and I mean if folks keep
Yes.
rolling in,
Yeah.
then that's fine.
I
Yeah,
think we can start going.
yeah,
Well, thank you everybody for coming. Welcome. I really appreciate this. Looks like we'll have a nice small intimate group, which is fine because as some of you may have heard, we want to keep this session kind of interactive. I want to make sure that I'm answering your questions and addressing your needs in terms of what you're looking for, and hopefully this content will address some of it. But I'm happy to go off script and answer questions as we go. So feel free to either raise your hand or put something in the chat. I want to keep it interactive, I'm not asking anybody to have to wait until the end for the questions because I don't think that is as effective personally. I want this to have, as opposed to a presentation, I'd like to have a conversation with you all, about these topics. So feel free to interject as we proceed. All righty? Great. Well, as many of you know, I'm sure I'm Bryon Isaacs. Okay. I have been a business and technology consultant in the private sector for over 30 years. And I'm humbled in terms of it's been quite a lengthy but also rewarding career in terms of had many opportunities and work in many industries. And most recently, I left the private sector kind of formally, working in technology, and joined the University of Texas in Austin in their career engineering Cockrell School Career Assistance Center, okay, where I am fulfilling, it was an ongoing passion of mine to make this pivot and do this change into focusing full time on providing career advice, career support. And in this environment, obviously, it's to our young folks, our engineering students. Okay, but I also, in other capacities, provide that same type of guidance and advice to seasoned professionals. Because as you see in my history, I've had the badge of honor, let's put it this way, in terms of having to seek a new job 9 times throughout this 30-year career. And 6 of those times were due to an unexpected layoff. So many of you, sadly, know what I mean by that when that happens. But fortunately, through the support and membership in job clubs like Purpose Works and Launchpad Job Club, and discussing with my colleagues, 8 of those 9 times, I was able to find myself a new position within 3 months or less, which is quite remarkable given the job market. And it's like, statistically, it's about 67% faster than your average job seeker, because in today's market and in the previous market, it's typically 6 and 9, and now upwards, it's getting close to 12 months before you find, an equivalent desirable role from where you left. So I'm here tonight to kind of share a number of those tips and tricks and techniques, okay, to help job seekers, to help, accelerate their time to finding that next new position, that next new career, okay? And the other tip in terms of my role, again, previously I was in technology, focusing on educational software, and that kind of made a very nice transition for me now to be serving in the broader educational ecosystem. Okay. All right, so I'll jump right into it. Basically, what I have and what I'm going to share with you today at a high level is what I call my 5-step job plan for search success, all right? And the steps, keep them short and simple, but basically, the number 1 step, and I'm going to get into more depth in this in a moment, is get your mind right, okay? This is critical. It's the first and hardest step, and it's essential because you need to have a confident, proactive attitude about your job search You need to overcome those feelings of failure and rejection and depression and unworthiness that we've all sort of experienced when it comes to a job loss. And getting over that hump, okay, allows you to get into a positive mind frame and generates and garners positive results. Okay. Get good. What I mean by that is training, improve yourself. Take this time off that you have now to work on building your marketable skills, building, enhancing your experiences, maybe getting certifications to give you some more qualifications and credentials, okay, for the type of job that you might be seeking. Get known, okay. This is a pivotal, what I call the marketing step, okay. This is where you work on defining what your brand is going to be. What is the face that you are going to provide to the job market, right? And build a personal marketing plan, because now you're in the mode. You, for better or for worse, are salespeople, and the product is yourself, okay? And that's what you're going to need to work on in order to get that next great opportunity. And so, and we'll get into more detail on this as well, updating your resume, using LinkedIn, developing business cards, but most importantly, it's like real estate in terms of location. When it comes to the job search, it's networking.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's pivotal, and we'll talk more about that. The other two steps, the get busy, in terms of just realizing that finding work is work. Okay, it's a journey, and you have to treat it like a job, and you have to put in the time, and you have to put in the effort, and put in the discipline in order to get to that next successful point in your life journey, and then get paid. And actually, what's kind of almost ironic is that if you are successful in terms of those first 4 steps, right, that 5th step in terms of compensation and salary and bonus and negotiations for all of that becomes actually probably the easiest step in this whole path. So today, I'm going to be focusing on the first 3 steps. Okay, this is the first part of essentially a kind of a 2-part series. Mm-hmm. So we're going to be talking about steps 1 through 3 this evening, and then next week, or maybe the week after, depending when we schedule the next part, we'll address steps 4 and 5. Okay. So, big one: get your mind right. Now, when, as I said, if some of you caught, in terms of my metrics, 8 out of those 9 times, I, found a job, found a new position in 3 months or less. The one time that I didn't, okay, it took me 11 months, 11 days, and approximately 11 hours, okay, to find that next position. And what I realized is I spent almost 6 months struggling with my mindset and my mind frame, okay? And that's why that particular job search, it was, a very significant layoff, a really coming out of left field. And I think personally, it was devastating to me. And it took me a long time, right, to get my mind right? And I'm sure, some of you, and I welcome you to kind of chime in, the recovering from a layoff, right, dealing with those issues of failure, feelings of rejection and depression, shame and unworthiness, right? Those are all real. We're all human, we're not, we're not, cases of armor, right? We have feelings, and it does affect us, right? And what was happening is, because I didn't appropriately deal with these feelings and these concerns, right, I kept self-sabotaging myself in the job search, right? I developed this twisted and poor self-image, okay? I was showing up like the old guy nobody would ever hire, It got so bad, right, in terms of my mental frame. It was like,
Hey, Bryon,
sure.
I've been laid off 23 months.
23 months.
Yep.
Oh, that is extensive. I must say again, I am I feel for you. That is quite an extensive time, and I don't know if we'll have an opportunity to maybe when we get to the questions and answers talk a little bit more about that and maybe understand a little bit better in terms of what has gone on in that time frame, and maybe try to identify some things that we can get you kind of back on track, because I feel that is lengthy, and I am sorry for that. I'm hoping we could have a conversation amongst us all to see if we can help change that trajectory for you, Sanjay.
Yeah, I think that's something good that we can revisit at the end. I guess the one perspective I was going to share really quick was, I know that Bryon, you're sharing this specific set of feelings and kind of based on the long duration you had after you were laid off, but really even for some of our audience that are kind of students and starting to look into the job market, not being laid off, but even just the struggles of getting that first interview, being fresh to the job market, like the feelings are all the same, right? Like you feel failure, you feel rejection, you feel depression. So I think it applies on no matter where you are in your job search and where you are in your journey. So I think that it's a really important lesson to remember is you have to be in the right frame of mind.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that. But anyway, the point that I was going to make is that I had such a twisted self-image that it was like, I wouldn't want to work for any company that was stupid enough to hire me. that's kind of how I felt. Right? So let's talk about resolving that situation. What we need to do to get our mind in that right framework. Right now, we have to recognize that it's okay to grieve. Right, it's okay to feel badly about that job loss. A lot of people, their job is their identity. Okay, and it's a death like a family member almost, sort of thing, right? So it's okay to have that grief, and you need to spend some time dealing with that. The question is how much time you do grieve, right? You need to be aware of it, and then you need to define it. For some people, it might be a week, it might be a month, it might be a couple of months. Hopefully, going through that grieving process doesn't extend beyond that, because if it does, and it's just kind of a rule of thumb, then there may be some other things going on that you may not be, addressing in terms of the surface. Right? Take this time to do a candid self-assessment, right? Introspection is a great thing, okay? Looking at yourself objectively, right, will allow you to move on, right, and get to that third key step around defining yourself, defining your brand, defining your direction, where it is that you want to go. And we're going to be talking about building a market plan in the next couple of slides, okay? But that's very key, that mind awareness and then that focus of doing that marketing plan, okay, is a very critical catalyst in terms of moving you and allowing you to pivot. So we'll talk more about that in a moment. Getting active, just physically active can make a huge difference in terms of getting your mindset in the right frame, right? Exercising, meditating, praying, getting out of the house, getting away from the computer, socializing, in a non-stress type environment, having fun, listening to music. And also, something that I share a lot with my clients is don't be afraid to take a risk, to make a pivot. I've done that many times in my career, and more these career pivots are causes you to change your trajectory in terms of where you want to go. Okay, I think there was a question.
I was just asking in the chat if people feel comfortable in sharing kind of how long they've been in their journey, just because I think we all feel like, oh, I've been in my job search for so long, but really a lot of people have been in their job search. I think just sharing helps. But I think one of the things I was going to say, just even from my own personal experience, Bryon, on this is, I think, yes, we feel like we're in that state of mind and we want to get out of the state of mind. But I think there's an aspect of guilt because you feel like, oh, I'm unemployed. I should spend every waking moment focusing on a job search. But then you forget about all these things that bring a positive attitude and help you kind of think with clarity. So it's a very fine line. But yeah, I absolutely agree. I think it's so important to make sure that you're in the right frame of mind as you're going through the process. So for sure.
Right. Yeah. And the thing is, and I said it in the previous slide, and I'll reiterate it. Yes, you do have to dedicate a certain amount of time and treat your job search like a job. Okay. But it's also important not to obsess over that, right?
Yes.
To maintain that balance. Let's say we treat it as a 30-hour work week or a 40-hour work week. That means you take your evenings off, you take your weekend off, because you need that mental break and you need to give yourself that grace. As long as you're being effective in those 40 hours, and I'm going to talk more about that in terms of building your plan and building your search strategies, as long as you're doing those things, right, and you're accountable to yourself, you should feel very, very comfortable taking those breathers and taking those time off, because that's another rat hole, and that you can, run into in terms of beating yourself up too much in terms of doing the job search, right? So give yourself some grace from that perspective. Okay. All right. Get good part. This is fairly easy and fairly straightforward, and people will be able to get the recording so you can have the notes about this and so forth. But basically, as I said, it's a time to improve yourself, improve your skills. Okay. I did a lot of reading, and I recommend it to many of my clients. These are just some books that are very helpful in terms of giving you some tools, techniques, guidance, frameworks, and so forth, right, around being very effective in doing the job search. This one, highly touted book in terms of the unwritten rules of the highly effective job search. This one, Steve Dalton, a career coach that I've had some experience with, he's got two books here that I recommend. The 2-Hour Job Search. So he's all about being efficient, right? This is where you can, you pat yourself on the back. If you can get efficient around your job search, you can maintain that, work-life balance in terms of those activities. The Job Closer, Getting to Yes. This last book is really after you've gotten a new job, and it talks about those first 90 days critical in terms of a new position. And to me, it's personally been very effective, because I pivoted to a new job, wasn't aware of this book. The job was fine, but after a year, I realized it really wasn't kind of a good fit. So I left and moved on. Then the next job that I took, I read this book, became aware of it, and that launched me into a 4 or 5 year stay career at that particular organization, because those first 90 days in a new role are very critical to kind of the foundation of your success going forward. That's why I recommend it. And then, what's really nice is many of these books you can get at the public library. You get half-price books, get used, and so forth. So it doesn't have to be, expensive in order to do that. I think many of you hopefully are aware of a lot of online training and courses. I highly recommend those, as well as, again, depending on your field, it might be the appropriate time to seek certifications to build your qualifications and build your credentials in the job market. Okay. All right. Let's talk about getting known and this key step, and we spend a little bit of time here. I believe, okay, and I recommend that building a marketing plan, or some people call it a job search plan, is foundational to your success in the job search. And this is one of the tools and techniques that, going back to some of the questions in terms of the length that you've been searching. If you have one of these tools definitely shorten that job search, because the marketing plan or the job search plan is your roadmap. It's your direction, right? It defines you above the masses in terms of, if you put in thoughtful, critical, objective thought around what your marketing plan is, right? It helps focus your efforts. It helps you target certain organizations, okay? And it helps you be more effective in your job search journey, all right? So I know you can't read all of this and so forth, but basically at a high level, it's a very simple job plan. You define a professional objective, what it is, think about, what do you enjoy doing? What do you not enjoy doing? What sort of environment do you like to work in? And state that in writing, okay? You define a positioning statement. Who am I? Okay, what do I have to offer to the market, right? Am I a data analyst? Am I a product manager? Am I a project manager? Are my critical skills organizational, leadership, and now analytical skills, synthesization skills, insight, creativity? Think about those. Those are critical in terms of, defining and then presenting that image, okay, to potential employers and colleagues, etc. You look at your competencies, and this, you can get some help from this in terms of the types of roles that you define for yourself. Make sure that the competencies align with those particular roles, right? Again, you look at your history, you look at your experiences, what you like doing, what you have enjoyed doing, what brings you happiness and fun that becomes a marketable skill within the job market. Okay, that's what I mean about competencies. For me in technology, it was around customer service and professional service and client service. It was around understanding enterprise systems and so forth. But whatever role you find, focus on what you think your personal competencies are within that particular role. Okay. Then think about where do you want to work, whether a certain geographic location, whether you want to stay local, whether you want to move, the types of industries that you want to work in, whether it's going to be healthcare, public sector, private sector, etc. The size of organization, that matters. Again, this is your ideal opportunity. So don't be afraid to express what's ideal for you, whether it's a small organizations, entrepreneurial, startups, or large corporations. People have different flavors and tastes. The culture of the organization is also really key, because at the end of the day, oftentimes it's the cultural fit that makes the difference for you in terms of your success within a particular role, within a particular job market. For me, culturally, I was looking for a customer-centric, entrepreneurial type organization, something that was innovative, collaborative, and most importantly, and this is a big one for me, fun. I'd like to have fun when I'm at work, right? I like to have joy and enthusiasm, and you like to be in a kind of collegial environment, where people are working and don't take themselves too seriously, because that, to me personally, can get real depressing real fast. And so then with that in mind, you then developed your target list of organizations. And at the time when I did it, I broke it up into categories, looking at small businesses and startups, looking at what I considered innovators, industry leaders, like a Deloitte or a Visa or Charles Schwab, for example, and large, the large technology companies, the big names and so forth that everybody's familiar with, whether it's an Amazon or a Google or Microsoft, or some that are just second tier, like an OpenText, which some of you may or may not know as a software company. So you cannot spend too much time working on building this plan, right? Because it's an investment, it's a foundation, and it creates, in some circumstances, that launch pad for your new direction, your new trajectory. That's why it's so critical. And it's also a dynamic document, right? Keep in mind that as you're going through your job search, you're going to refine and update this, because you're going to learn from each experience and each contact, okay, how to focus it and tailor it. Again, allow you to be more intentional around your search. That's a key thing. A couple of tips related to this marketing plan is, of course, what it does is once you feel comfortable with it, it then drives things like updating your resume, updating your LinkedIn to make it, consistent with this. I'll throw in a little LinkedIn technique that I found very helpful to some folks, is that there's the 3-2-1 routine, okay? And that is, in order to, how the LinkedIn algorithm works is that the more activity you have on LinkedIn, the higher you come in search results by recruiters and so forth. So to achieve the minimum level of activity that LinkedIn looks for in terms of your profile, is the 3-2-1 rule. And that is each week, okay, you need to comment at least 3 times on particular posts. You need to share at least twice, or repost, and you need to post ideally at least once a week. And if you can maintain that 3-2-1 activity on LinkedIn, that will help and support you in terms of coming up in searches that recruiters and others might be doing. I mean, statistically, LinkedIn says that if you post at least once a week, then you're 4 times more likely to show up in job searches by other folks. So that's all based on their metrics. Go ahead, Hussein.
Yeah, just really quick. I guess I was gonna just add to that a little bit is, absolutely. The LinkedIn algorithm and LinkedIn search is very much geared towards surfacing what they consider to be active users, and so you have to be active on the platform. It's just the catch-22 of LinkedIn. And then just to kind of shed a little bit of light on the 3-2-1 rule, Bryon mentioned 3 comments. So remember that just adding a reaction isn't generally sufficient. Like, you should add something that contributes value. The goal with LinkedIn is LinkedIn foundationally is trying to get as many eyeballs, as much engagement as possible on the platform. And a reaction doesn't generate a whole lot of engagement, but if you add a comment, then you add it to the conversation, which is really LinkedIn's goal. So remember that the 3 is 3 comments, not just like a thumbs up or a like or whatever. Like, actually just add something of value. And it doesn't need to be, and Bryon and I've talked about this, it doesn't need to be like a tremendously thoughtful comment, right? But just something that adds to the conversation, whatever your insight is, just even a couple of sentences is all that they're looking for.
Yeah, at least a brief sentence in terms of providing your insight. And I mean, it's a social network, and you need to be comfortable, and you want to engage. So yes, it is more than just a thumbs up. It is words. It is a statement.
And I think a lot of us shy away from engaging too much because we all feel like, hey, we don't have anything of value to add, and we don't want to be that extra noise in the system. But I think that's the wrong way to think about it. Really, it's, hey, can I be part of the conversation? And that's really it.
Yeah. Join the conversation is, I guess one of the popular themes. I don't know if that was LinkedIn or if that was Facebook way back in the way, but it's still very true in terms of today. And anyway, as I said earlier, networking. Because the reality, and again, it's been proven out statistically, is that 70 to 80% of the jobs are found through networking, right? I mean, only 10%, and that's a measly 10%, of job seekers are successful through online applications, without any networking effort, right? It's a very low statistic. So that's why it's fruitless to spend a lot of your time blindly submitting job applications online. It's a pain, and it's very low return, okay? Networking is key. The other part of networking is that 75% of the available jobs are in what's called the hidden job market. They're not posted online, right? They're just known by other hiring managers who are thinking about it, talking about it, but haven't gone to the efforts, because it's a lot of paperwork for folks to post these jobs. So they seek that job seekers, right? And the hidden job market is exposed through networking. There's no other way to get to it, okay? Because of the fact of why it's called hidden. The point about making business cards, that one, again, does not have to be expensive. It can be a very simple thing. You can do it on your home computer and printer. And really, it's just a simple contact card with your basic information. What I did is simply, had a card that said my name, my phone number, I'm based in Austin, my LinkedIn link to it. And that was it. And that was very helpful in terms of those quick exchange of personal information that happen during when you're doing, a networking event, for example. Okay. Sorry, was there another comment?
Yeah, I was just actually going to ask. So I guess maybe clarify for the group and for myself as well is, when you say networking, like what does that mean? Because I think people have different ideas of what networking is, right? Is it just showing up in person? Is it just getting a bunch of LinkedIn connections? Like, what do you kind of define as effective networking? Because I think a lot of people spend time on what they think is networking, but it's really not adding value either. It's the same as just blindly applying to jobs, right? So like, what is a good way to meaningfully network?
Yeah, there are different levels of it, right? And I know that sometimes networking comes off as a little bit scary and intimidating, and that's why I'm going to give you a slide specifically on that, and we'll get to that in just 1 second. So let me transition.
Yeah, yeah.
And any questions, because I know this is a big deal, and I want to make sure people kind of understand. Any questions so far around the marketing plan and the jobs or job search plan, if you prefer, and why it's such a critical document and a critical exercise for you?
Oh, it looks like Francis has a question.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, real quick. I was curious your thoughts on how you think about your own personal websites with the combination of business cards. Like, how do you see there's value in building your own personal branded website along with business cards they hand out, and feel like that's a better viewpoint? Sometimes a recruiter's so busy they don't want to like peruse a LinkedIn; they just want to see something quickly. I'm curious on your experience there.
Well, it's twofold, right? For me, the simplicity of a very simple little business card, like I said, did on my home printer, a lot of different templates that you can use. That is very convenient for the in-person interactions in terms of, well, here's my contact information, and you're good, right? LinkedIn is, I guess, one step below your own personalized website. I mean, for many job seekers, if you work on building a thoughtful LinkedIn profile, with a picture and good content and data, and we might be able to have time to talk a little bit about that, then there's not as much pressure or need to do a personalized website. Although I will admit, folks that have the talent and the ability, and now, it's becoming less and less a barrier of entry to create that. I know a number of my marketing colleagues who are in marketing, they've gone to the effort of building a personal website to help define their brand broader. Okay. But I think that is a nice to have versus a mandated requirement, because the reality is the majority of folks are looking for people with effective LinkedIn profiles, using that platform. And that's just the reality of the market. You are going to be seen by that. You are going to be evaluated that. That's sort of the common denominator now. Okay. And a website would just take you, further and above. But I don't think it's absolutely necessary if you're leveraging your LinkedIn profile effectively.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay, one comment that I want to make and hear and share, and I'm sure Hussein will appreciate it, is that GigHQ agrees with me in terms of the criticality of a marketing plan. So part of the system, okay, helps you build that marketing plan out. So these are just a couple of screenshots, or within GigHQ, the Career Compass is the tool. There's the free tool, and then there's the integrated tool, right? If I said that correctly, in terms of building out that marketing plan. So just a tip of the hat in terms of GigHQ for that perspective. All right. All right. So let's talk about networking. And this slide it focuses a lot on the in-person networking, okay? But there's also that tier below that, and that is leveraging LinkedIn to build your networking. So let me touch on that a little bit before I get into sort of the in-person activity. So one of your goals is to build out your LinkedIn network, okay, and establish a number of contacts. Because the reality is, and this is for most job seekers, it is not your first level contacts where your next job is going to reside. It's typically your second and third level contacts are the folks that can provide the opportunities, because that's a bigger web and a broader set. Now, from a LinkedIn perspective, a goal you should set for yourself is to build a minimum of 500 contacts, okay? I know that might sound a little daunting, but it actually really isn't that hard to do if you're focused about how you connect with folks. The reason I say that is that after that time, LinkedIn only displays that you have 500 and more contacts, right? Below that, it shows that specific number. And that specific number is an easy gauge for LinkedIn to see how active you are or how networked you are. Once you hit that 500 mark, right, then you become into the established class of LinkedIn. Let's put it that way. Okay. So that's and the way you do that, right, is obviously you're starting with your connections, and with every connection that you make, either in person or online, add them to your LinkedIn network, right? You try to be proactive about doing that so that you'll find yourself. It took me, it was about a month or two of actively pursuing and connecting and leveraging one contact to the next that I was able to, get to that 500 number and so forth, and continue to do that regularly now. So that's the LinkedIn networking, all right? Now, I was going to talk more about the in-person networking, because I know this is the big deal in terms of a lot of people anxiety and concern, right? And you need to kind of think about it in this way. Effective networking is about building authentic, mutually beneficial relationships, okay? It's not about collecting business cards per se, right? It's about focusing on value that you could provide and the other person could provide, and maintaining kind of a longer term perspective on that, building that networking, because it takes time, right? And ways to help you do that is that if you're strategic about it, right? So for example, before an event or before an outreach, you identify, there's like LinkedIn networks, there's the big ass Happy Social Club and so forth. There's a number of meetups and networks where you can have opportunity to sort of practice these skills. But one of the ways that you can help yourself is a few things. Define your goals, right, in terms of the event, right? Understand what this networking group is. What are you going to do in this? Are you looking for maybe finding a mentor? Are you looking for new clients? Are you looking for the job opportunities, right? So focus your efforts in terms of what's your objective for this particular networking event, right? Acknowledge your value. Recognize that, networking is a two-way street, right? You have value, and you need to be confident in that in terms of sharing that value, when you're having these kind of conversations, and others will reciprocate and share theirs, okay? If it's a very, defined event, research maybe some of the key people or presenters who are going to be at that particular event, right? So that you can help identify either connections or contacts with them, or connections or contacts with people who are associates of them, right? So doing that research is very, very beneficial. Crafting your pitch. I'm sure many of you heard about an elevator pitch. I mentioned that that's relative similar to your positioning statement in your marketing plan, right? Explains who you are, what you do, what your key skills are, what value you bring, okay? Why would somebody want to hire you, right? And getting that down into succinct, concise statement, and getting comfortable repeating that and introducing yourself like that. But you don't want to make it robotic. You just want to be comfortable, and practice will give you that confidence of, stating who you are. For example, it's like some folks, for example, might say, "Hey, I'm I'll give you one. Okay, I'm Benjamin, or I'm Francis Geronimo, and I'm a marketing analyst passionate about transforming data into actionable insights. I'd like to work in collaborative environments. I have skills in terms of analyzing and reviewing, massive amounts of data and reducing it into actionable, insightful, recommendations, something like that." I don't work for that guy, or I don't want that guy to work for me. All right. Oh, your online presence. Again, that goes back to LinkedIn, making sure that any of online profiles, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's your own website, that is up to snuff, polished and up to date and consistent. At the networking opportunity, adopt what I like to call a give first mindset. Look for opportunities to help others, right? And instead of focusing on what you're looking for or what you need, right? And this creates that mutual respect, right? And creates that mutually beneficial relationship, which is ultimately what you try to do in a networking event, right? It also helps, helping others can be a very simple thing. It could be just offering to make an introduction or sharing an article. It's not a heavy lift, right? But it's that focus of saying you're willing to offer and to help as well as receive. Right? Being a good listener, right? Asking open-ended questions, right? Example, what do you enjoy the most about your work, or what's an interesting challenge you've been, pursuing, and so forth. Helps engage in more meaningful type conversations, all right? And prioritize quality over quantity. You don't have to meet, 50 people in a networking event. 3 or 5 might be totally fine, all right? Because there are quality relationships that you're establishing versus, again, superficial ones, right? That's the important point here. Manage your anxiety is set yourself, reasonable goals, such as maybe you just want to have 3 meaningful conversations at this particular event, right? Or there is at least one person in this industry that you would like to meet and start to talk with, establish a mentor or something like that. And then finally, ending your conversation gracefully. And this is where you can conclude saying, this was great speaking with you. I suggest, let's connect on LinkedIn. Can I have your contact information? Or here is mine. And, let's build our networks together. Something along those lines. After your event, and this is equally important at the event, is the follow-up, right? Following up promptly, sending a personalized message, a thank you, or providing, that commitment. You said, oh, here's the article I was referring to, here it is, sort of thing. Reference a specific detail in the conversation to create that online connection that you did as an in-person one. All right. And then manage and maintain your network, right? Reach out to some of those existing people that you haven't had touched with for a while. Check in on them, express genuine interest and concern, and get an update. And that can help you, again, leverage and grow your network. All right. And I think that's good, and that's like the reconnect with your dormant tiles and diversifying your network. Keep a broad picture in mind. And what I mean by diversifying is looking for, connections across different levels of careers or in different industries, so they can, gain newer and fresher perspectives that might have an impact on your own. Okay. Does that help answer your questions in terms of what we're thinking about re-networking? Okay. Oh, go ahead, Francis.
Yeah, I just have one question on dormant ties. How do you think about that in your own experience, right? So like an example being like I'll use my LinkedIn network and reach out to people and make it personal, that I reconnect, like a personal message, and also kind of pitch myself. But I wanted to hear from your experience how you go about reconnecting with dormant ties.
I do that. I think you have nailed it, Francis. That's exactly right. Although what I would do is I typically don't do the pitch myself part. It's the reconnecting part. I keep it brief and short in that first outreach. Okay. I also, one of the things that I do, and you find this very effective, is I don't know if you're familiar with the term informational interviews. Okay, that is where you are reaching out to an individual. You're not because you're seeking a job, but you're seeking some advice, right? And a little flattery, goes a long way. You might identify, for example, let's say you want to get into product management, right? There may be somebody immediately in your network that has that skill set, or it may be somebody else related to them. But I would say either to that individual in my network, or let's start there. I'm looking for information on the product manager role. Okay, do you know of anybody, right, that's working in that field that you can refer me to? And that's one way of building a network. And then to that person's name, if you get it right, you reach out to them and said, I was referred to you by X. I really value having the ability to learn from your experience in terms of your role, how you got to where you've gotten. it perhaps you don't think we might schedule a brief conversation, or buy you a coffee and talk about how you've gotten to that position of a product marketer manager, this type of thing. Right? And so you're not talking that you're looking for a job. You're actually looking for information. You're looking for a conversation, and that will lead to growing your network or lead to other opportunities related to that individual who's working in the field that you want to work in. Okay.
I just to kind of add to that a little bit. I think one of the things that I've tried to do is when I'm trying to reconnect with some people is if they have an expertise in a certain area, not necessarily even for a job and all that, but just I'm like, hey, I see this new trend in marketing. I want to learn more. Can you share what resources do you use? What do you read? Where do you go? How do I learn from you? Just kind of get the ball rolling into that, to kind of what Bryon was saying earlier. It kind of strokes them, like it's a compliment to them. Is like they're the expert, you're reaching out, right? So like then you can get that ball rolling. I think that kind of thing helps, right? Is if you let the other person do the talking, that's always where there's value in the conversation, right? Like the less talking you do and the more talking they do, like the better the conversation generally goes, I think. So just that's one approach I've used.
Yeah, exactly right. And it doesn't hurt to repeat. Yes, you are seeking, their advice. If you're looking for advice, or you're looking for some of their expertise, or if you're looking for their insight, that's very complimentary to them. And people, are very comfortable around comfortable talking about themselves and talking about their journey. And if you present it that way, you're much more likely to have success to engage in that conversation, or get that recommendation, or get that support, a direction in terms of where you want to move to, if you approach it as a seeker of their knowledge and their advice and insights.
Yep.
Okay. All righty.
Thank you.
I think that takes us to the end of the topics, and I did this because I wanted to leave some time for questions and conversation. Oh, let me just add it.
I think this last bit. So
this is the last bit slide. Around the networking, one other nice tool that GigHQ has is what's called its outreach agent, right? And this helps you. This AI helps, based on the job that you're seeking and your particular profile. It will crawl, through LinkedIn to identify potential and recommended contacts, right, for you to reach out to, that's related to the area that you want to work in. So it's very helpful. It gives you some more focus and more direction and advice around how you can strategically, build your network.
Yeah, and just to kind of add a little bit to that. So the reason we really thought this was like a useful thing was, the challenge when you, so this is Cloudflare. So if I I'm looking at a role at Cloudflare, and if I go on LinkedIn, really the only people I can see on LinkedIn is like my immediate connections and my secondary connections, and everyone beyond that's kind of further away, and it really makes it hard to kind of find specific people. So the way we took it was, we actually didn't want to focus on the individual's network. It was more around, hey, there's this product designer role at Cloudflare. And so what the tool is doing is, when you, the screenshots are a little bit small, I apologize, but on the left-hand side in the Chrome extension, if you hit the Find Contacts button, it's basically doing a combination of a Google search and a LinkedIn search, and it does a few different verticals. So it tries to find people that would be peers for that role, people that would be on like the team of that role. So if it's a designer, it might be a product manager, might be someone you work with, or an engineer. It tries to find people that are in recruiting at that company. And the way that really leverages is twofold. One is you can, of course, in-mail them. But I think going back to what Bryon was sharing and the power of networking, like what I really recommend people do is, if it finds 4 or 5 people, like hit follow on LinkedIn. And then when they say something, like engage with them. So rather than reaching out to them with an email saying, hey, I'm interested in a role, if you engage with their content and then they see you in there, and then you say, oh, I saw you posted this, it was really interesting. Oh, by the way, I'm also interested in a role at Cloudflare. It's a completely different conversation. So really try to think of it that way. And this is in our Chrome extension. It's also a standalone tool. So if you go to the second one, outreach.GigHQ.ai, that requires you have to enter in the details. The Chrome extension automatically pulls it from the page. But definitely give it a try as you're trying to find roles. As you find roles and you're trying to find people to talk to, it's a very powerful tool. And we're looking for feedback. So if you use it and it works for you, tell us. If it doesn't work for you, if there's things you would do differently with it, like let us know. We want to build this for everyone. So please give us feedback.
Yeah, I see. That's
Salesforce,
really
yeah.
question. And just before we take your question, one thing I want to emphasize is again that initial contact. Recognize and acknowledge that they have said something maybe in their posts or that they're in a position that you are interested in, and I would frame it in terms of, I'd like to seek your advice, or I'd like to understand a little bit more about your journey, and I'd like to understand a little bit more about your role. Could you share a little bit more of your expertise in that area? Okay. And not until after you've had some kind of conversation would you maybe mention that, hey, because you want to position it as an informational interview, and that lowers their resistance, right? Sort of thing. So you want to keep it that way, that you'd like to have this informational expertise conversation with them to build your understanding. And then typically towards the end, you might ask about, are you aware of any other opportunities or any other folks in this industry that you think it might be beneficial for me to chat with, that kind of thing. Okay. Just a subtle tip there. All right. Your question from Sasri?
Yeah, that's a really good suggestion. Maybe I could try to do that from now on, rather than just directly jumping into saying like, "Hey, have you this opportunity or not?" But my question is totally unrelated to that. I had a question regarding LinkedIn. I learned a lot about LinkedIn in this meeting, but I wanted to ask. I heard few people said that when you apply for jobs on LinkedIn, you can see that 100 people applied or 100 plus people applied, or some people say that put a filter saying that apply to only jobs which are posted in less than 24 hours. So I've been doing that, but do you recommend like applying only to the jobs that are posted in the past 24 hours and ignore the jobs which are like applied by hundreds of people, or do you recommend like still focusing on those?
No, here's the thing, and this is what I mean about doing strategic applications, okay? And you can be on LinkedIn or it could be online. And personally, my preference is particularly for any jobs that are posted, I like to apply directly on the company job site versus LinkedIn, okay? But what I mean about strategic applications, and this is why I lessen the amount of time that I apply to jobs online, is I don't apply to a job, or I prefer to apply to a job where I have some established connection, right? Either I've done the work to find out who the hiring manager is for that particular job, done the research, or somebody in the hiring management chain of the organization, okay? Or you found a contact within LinkedIn that could be a referral to that particular job, right? I don't worry about the time frame. I don't worry about how many people has posted to it. What I worry about is before I submit an application, knowing that I have some insight into who is hiring and who that hiring manager is, or an individual who is part of that organization, right? And what I do is, if it's, and this worked for me several times in my most recent position, is using AI, using LinkedIn search. I was able to identify the hiring manager. I saw the job opportunity posted on the company website. In this case, it was UT. Okay. I submitted my application. I directed the cover letter to that hiring manager. And then on LinkedIn, I sent a short connection request, as I think you're all familiar with, right? It has to be less than 300 characters. Okay. To connect with that hiring manager, saying along the lines, hello, it was Marilyn in this case. I'm very excited about the opportunity you recently posted on your job site. I recently submitted my application. I hope you give it full consideration. In the meantime, I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn as well. But kind of say. Yeah.
I think that totally makes sense. And one more question is that do you recommend only looking for jobs on the job boards? I know that there are a lot of jobs posted, but you mentioned that you're applying directly on the website. But how do you know when they post the jobs, or do you constantly require to check their websites?
Well, this is the thing. Like I said, LinkedIn is very helpful and it'll provide that job board. But typically, as I said, personally, I like to go directly to the website. But going back to how I know is because of my target companies. Right. For example, UT Austin was one of the target companies I was looking at. So I was regularly reviewing their career pages in terms of finding and doing searches in there. So when you have that target list as part of your marketing plan, that's what I mean about being focused, right? These are the companies that you're going after. So you connect with them, you follow them on LinkedIn, and you do a regular review of postings within their organization.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point because right now, for example, me, I'm giving the complete control to the job boards like LinkedIn. Whatever jobs they post, I'm
Right.
applying for that. I'm not the driver here. I'm just sitting in the passenger seat. But I think this is a good thing, like taking the control and looking for the
exactly. And like I said, it's fruitless. It's a fruitless activity because you have a low chance of return when you're doing blind applications, willy-nilly, untargeted and unfocused.
Yeah.
If you invest the time to do targeted applications with connections, right, you're going to have a much higher likelihood of success.
I know that Bryon feels as strongly as I do about easy apply on LinkedIn. So we won't even go there. We're running out of time. But I did want to share one thing really quick is to share She's earlier point about kind of the, look for 24 hours or less and, how many people have applied and all that. So keep in mind that with the current job market, no one is hiring anyone in a week, right? Like the current job market is it takes forever. So even if 500 people have applied, or even if you don't know and it says a bunch of people applied, but you are the one person that found a contact, got connected, got your name to the top of the list, like it's worth the spending that time. Even if it takes you find a job you really like, you haven't yet applied, but you take 3 days to make that connection, do that first, you will come out on top of that. So it's really one of those things where people don't pay enough attention to. And I'm also realizing I didn't put the light on. I look like I'm in a cave, so I apologize for that. It's really dark in here, so sorry about that, guys. It just got really dark and I didn't realize it. But
I'm the polar opposite. I'm on the sun here.
I also want to be respectful of everyone's time. I know it's already past 7. I don't know, Bryon, if you have a hard stop, but I mean, I don't want to keep anyone any longer. But if people have questions.
No, I'm happy. I'm happy. I don't have a hard stop, so I'm willing to stay on a little bit longer. But I cannot emphasize the point enough. Making that strategic job application is critical to your success, right? The blind applications, you're just spinning your wheels and wasting a lot of time. So it doesn't matter how many people have applied or how old the posting would be. If you have a connection or if you identified the hiring manager and you can personalize your application in that way and make a LinkedIn connection, you will jump to the front of the line. That's just human nature.
Yeah, I think I learned a lot in this session, especially with the strategic applying. I have a lot of friends who are struggling to get a job and they are just doing the same, applying blind, like going on LinkedIn, but they know nothing about targeting companies and like applying strategically. I think I will share this information with them. And thank you so much.
Yeah, and we will be sending out the link to the recording. So if you want to share that with friends and all of that, please feel free. And as Bryon mentioned, we haven't scheduled it, but this was meant to be a 2-part series because I knew there was going to be a lot of questions. So we'll do part 2 in the next few weeks, and we'll definitely send out some communications. And if you see that and you want to invite other people, definitely do that too. But I do want to. I know we should be respectful of people's time. So and thank you, Bryon, so much for taking the time. It's always great conversation, and I think there's so many questions from people, so it was very generous of you to kind of share your knowledge and all that.
And one thing I want to do, and I'm happy to extend this, and particularly to you, Sanjay, because I'm on LinkedIn. Okay, I'm very easy to find. People have the spelling of my name. I also have my personal email and phone number in there. So again, specifically,
and I have Sanjay's contact. I can share your information with him.
Because I'd love to have a more detailed conversation with you in terms of what your journey's been like and seeing if we can provide some additional help.
I will definitely get you guys in touch for sure.
Okay.
Thank you, Bryon.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if thank you all for joining and thank you, Bryon, once again. And like I said, we'll send out the recording in the next day or so. And then we will schedule a follow-up and start sharing that date with you guys so you can make sure you put it on your calendar as well.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks.
Pleasure meeting everybody.
Okay.
Have a good evening.
You too.
Bye-bye.